Hello, this is Angelia, and you are watching the podcast, or listening to it, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. We're having a lighting issue today, as you can see, so I have to use my magnifying glass again, because it's just so dark. You know, it's I don't have a lot of backlighting for these, words here. So today we're going to be talking about life after retirement. I have enjoyed mine. My husband's decided to hold his off, and hopefully he enjoys his, when he finally does retire. And I know a lot of people who've retired and they either liked it or didn't like it. So everyone's different and unique, and, it's going to be different for everybody. But let's dig into that. People who retire may feel the loss of a role that is central to their identity. And a lot of people have that problem. They quit work and that was who they were. When people ask, what do you do? And I always hate that question. It's like, well, because for me, your job is not who you are. That's what I told a lot of my clients who were struggling with, having to work and, didn't want to do that. And I said, we have to work for money sometimes. And, you can also have creative endeavors that you do in the evening or on Saturdays or whatever, so that you feel fulfilled. And you should have something, that makes you feel fulfilled. You shouldn't work the daily grind 9 to 5 at a job you hate and not have anything else in your life that fulfills it. You need to make the time, and I said make the time to do these things that fulfill you. Otherwise, you're just going to be miserable, if you have to do the daily grind and you hate it. Retirement may, oh my gosh. See, problem with the lights here going crazy. Retirement may bring other role adjustments, and it might, every time something different happens in your life, that changes your life, and so some things have to change sometimes. It not only alters, my gosh, household income, it's so hard to read without light, but also can change the division of household work, and that can be a thing too. Whereas before one person may have been the lion's share of that, now you might have to be, included in that. And some people don't care for that. And usually there's one sex that's a little more like that. I'm not going to call you out on that, but you know who you are. So, a fair division of labor when both people are home is important. Marital quality and distribution of power. That's something they teach you in couples counseling. Me and my husband went for, I'd even give him the next chance, for us to get married again. Because a lot of folks think that in a marriage, money makes the power. But it's not supposed to be that way. There's not supposed to be an inequality of power in the relationship. There's supposed to be two people coming together and having a relationship. So if you find that in your relationship, that's something you should probably go talk with a family therapist about, because there's not supposed to be an unequal power thing in your marriage. You're both supposed to have a vote, you're supposed to have a say, and it doesn't matter who makes the most money. It doesn't matter who's, more famous or whatever. There should be an equality in a marriage where both people have the same amount of power, have the same say, and even if one makes more money, that's how they're contributing to the household. The other person might be doing all the housework or, doing creative things on the side. So there should be an equal balance of power in your relationship. If there's not, you might want to go talk to somebody about that. Decision making, again, both people should be involved in decision making, not just one. there may be more time for contact with extended family and friends and for caring for grandchildren. Now, I know folks who have grandchildren already, and I'm not one of those folks yet. I have maybe if my son marries her, I'll have step grandchild, but no real grandchildren yet. She's a little sweetie. I like her. So, I might get there one of these days. Unexpected illness or disability or marital troubles of adult children can affect the retirement experience. Now, my middle son, he got a divorce about a year or so ago. He had to move in with my mother-in-law, and he was helping take care of her, but that got out of hand. So, yeah, he had to move back home, not to my home, but to his grandmother's, because she had a big house and, empty bedrooms, 3 empty bedrooms. So, he moved in over there to help out. But, that's not something that you plan on. When you move out, you get married and stuff, you don't plan on things going wrong to where you have to come back home, and recoup before you can move on again. Retirement is not a single event, but an ongoing process, and its impact must be assessed in context. And that's true. Because, like I say, we were talking yesterday about saving up for retirement and getting as big a nest egg as you can for your retirement. Getting foggy here. So that's an important thing to do. So that, you can be okay when you retire. And you've been working towards retirement your whole life. You might not think about it that way, but you have. From the day you started working, you're working towards retirement. Personal resources, health, socioeconomic status, and personality, economic resources, and social relational resources such as support from a partner and friends can affect how well retirees weather this transition. Because, when you retire, you're going to be home all the time. So if you have a crap relationship with your spouse, you're going to be fighting. Because there's not that, relationship for you to enjoy now. That's why, like I said, I want to make sure, I love my husband, but we'll both admit we loved each other from day one, but we didn't know how to love each other. We didn't have good examples on how to do that. So, there were power struggles and, control issues and, things. So, that was the deal. It's like, okay, if we're going to do this again, we're going to do it right. You have some issues with anger. You're going to do anger management. You have bipolar. You won't take meds. You're going to have to take bipolar skills training. We fight a lot. And I don't want to have a marriage like that. So we're going to have to go to couples counseling and get that stuff hashed out and figured out so we can have a happy marriage. And it's the best thing we ever did. Because we have a great relationship now. It's a million times better than the ones we had prior. So, I'm glad we did it. Because, now we can be happy and can fight fair. And, have a relationship that's fulfilling for both of us. And it's just kind of a gimme that if people have more contacts and friends, they're going to do better than people who isolate. Let's see. A person's morale before retirement, excuse me here. In the 2-year longevity generational study of 458 married white relatively healthy men and women ages 50 to 72, men whose morale had been low tended to enjoy a boost during the honeymoon period immediately following retirement. So, your morale before you retire has a lot to do with it. So, if you weren't so happy before you retired, oh, I'm trying not to sneeze. It's not going to work. Bless me. Bless me. My goodness. So if you were happy, or unhappy before you retired, you're probably going to be happy when you retire. So you don't have to go to, as some people call it, the daily grind every day. So, that's going to be better for your morale. Whereas, if you had high morale before and associated your life with your job, maybe you won't have such a good time of it because you're going to be missing that piece that you considered you. Which, like I say, a job is a job. It's how you make money. You should never identify yourself with what you do for money. On the other hand, continuous retirement was associated with an increase in depressive symptoms, especially among men who had experienced such symptoms before. So, like I say, if you're depressed before you quit and retire, chances are that might get worse. So, that's something to think about before you retire. And maybe if you're having problems emotionally or mentally thinking about retirement, maybe you should go talk to a therapist and hash that out, Women's well-being was less influenced by retirement, their own or their husbands'. That their morale was less affected by changes in, income level and more by marital quality. So, there you go, men. We care less about your money than we do about the relationship. We want a nice quality marriage. So, that's most women. I know there's always exceptions to a rule. But we care more about the relationship than we do about your money. It's like I told one of my ex-boyfriends one time, I wouldn't care if he was a gas station attendant as long as you loved me and treated me right. So, and that's the truth. So, we care more about that than we do that money you got coming in. Because we're willing to be a little poor and, scrimp and save and, do a little more home style stuff if you're being good to us. That's just the truth right there. So a sense of personal control was a key predictor of morale in both men and women. So how much control you have over your life in retirement is usually going to tell whether you're going to be happy or not so happy. So if it's a forced retirement, it might be a problem for you. I know at first I was like, I don't want to not do what I've been doing. I don't want to do that. But then I found other ways to do it. So, it's good. And then there are people who can't wait for retirement. So again, it's all about how you feel about it. And what you're going to do to make it work for you. In other research, people who had a strong sense of competence and self-esteem during their working years were more likely to have positive feelings about retirement. Because, if you have self-esteem and you're, a pretty well-adjusted, balanced person, then chances are retirement is not going to be that big of a deal. You're just doing something different. And it's like, I said, well, I can't go to an office every day, but, now I can do this here from home. So I continue to do the things I loved. It's just, in a different way. During the first few years after retirement, people may have a special need for emotional support to make them feel they are still valued and to cope with the changes in their lives. And that's true. And my husband and my kids were great. The woman that I used to work with and for was great, and supporting me. My other friends, great. So, it helps to have a positive circle of folks around you that are going to, be there and be supportive of you. Because if you don't have that, then you're going to have to rely on your own self, and your own self is usually not objective about your situation. In one longitudinal study, the most powerful predictor of satisfaction with retirement was the size of a retiree's social support network. And there are people who I'm sure will disagree with that, because there are a lot of loners in the world. Like I said, everybody's different. So if you're a social butterfly and you have a lot of friends, that's how you're going to want to stay. And then if you're in between somewhere, that's how you're going to want to stay. You're going to want some time with friends and some time at home. And if you're at the other end and you don't like spending time with people, like I say, I know a man who enjoys sitting in his recliner watching TV, and he don't want to deal with people. So, it's what makes you happy is what's going to continue to make you happy. Excuse me, when you retire. Continuity theory suggests that people who maintain their earlier activities and lifestyles adjust most successfully. So again, this is just another stage in your life, and if you can look at it like that, then you're going to be better off. And like I said, if you continue to do some things that make you happy, you're going to be happier. Like I said, a lot of people, then they retire, if they miss that going out to work, they can volunteer. They go out places and volunteer, get a new circle of work friends. And some people who like to do creative things when they are at home, they do whatever, and then they have the rest of the day to create and make things, and that makes them happy. Or if they wanted to play sports, there are senior leagues in almost every sport there is. So if you continue to do the things that you love, you're going to be more fulfilled with retirement than someone who is depressed and sitting around and thinks this is the end of their life. Let's see. There we go. Socioeconomic status may affect the way retired people use their time. And that's true, because if you have to work, then you don't get to enjoy the retirement that other people who don't have to can enjoy. One common pattern, the family-focused lifestyle, consists largely of accessible, low-cost activities that revolve around family, home, and companions, conversation, watching television, visiting with family and friends, informal entertaining, playing cards, or just doing what comes along. And that's kind of how my grandparents were. They used to have friends who would come over and play cards with them. They played pinochle and bridge and all that fun stuff. And that was usually folks in their neighborhood. And we would go over and visit and talk to the neighbors, That was the thing in the day. You can't do that a lot of times nowadays. We don't do that here. We had a couple of good neighbors, and they passed on, and the new ones are not so much. So, that's kind of gone the way. I wish it was still like that. When my kids were little, it was still like that in this neighborhood, but it's changed. So, again, most people who fall in the middle of middle class, that's what they do. They spend time with family and friends, talk to them, and maybe talk to the neighbors and do things together. And usually, like I say, if you go about living your life like retirement's not the end of the world, you're probably going to be happier. A second pattern, balanced investment, is typical of more educated people who allocate their time more equally among family, work, and leisure. And so, they might do some volunteer work or might still work part-time, but they still, spend time with their family and, do leisure things. So, it's a little different. And usually more educated people want to keep their brain working because they enjoy learning, and, they want to keep things ticking up there. These patterns may change with age. In one study, younger retirees who were more satisfied with their quality of life were those who traveled regularly and went to cultural events, but after age 75, family and home-based activities yielded the most satisfaction. So at first, when you retire, that going out, seeing everything, like I said, my aunt and uncle did that. Going out, seeing everything, doing everything, that might be satisfactory to you. You might like that, and it's fun. But at some point, usually when your physicality starts to change, being a homebody is a little more satisfying, because you're comfortable in your home, and you don't have to get out and be uncomfortable walking or whatever, and have a lot of people around. So our needs change as we age in retirement. There are old folks that keep going up until the day they drop. There are some who just can't, do it anymore and, settle down to more, calm things sooner. Sunday painters, amateur carpenters, and others who have made the effort to master a craft or pursue an intense interest often make that passion central to their lives during retirement. And like I say, that's true. Excuse me. And that's a good thing. Like I say, retirement shouldn't be the end of your life. So if you had, like I say, if you miss work, you can always go and volunteer. If you had creative pursuits that you didn't fully get to pursue while you had to work, then that's a good time to take them up. If you wanted to play something and you didn't get to, like say if you played something in high school or college, but then you didn't get to, while you had to work, you can go back, and take that up again. Like I said, there's senior leagues in almost all sports, here and where I live there is anyway. So that's something that you can do. This third lifestyle pattern, serious leisure, is dominated by activity that demands skill, attention, and commitment. Retirees who engage in this pattern tend to be extraordinarily satisfied with their lives. That's usually your thrill seeker types who at the age of 70 go out and start climbing mountains and stuff like that. Most of us are not that guy and girl, but some people are. So again, it's all unique. It's depending on you and your lifestyle and what you want out of retirement. Just don't sit there like a bump on a log. You might want to do something with your life. Since the late 1960s, the proportion of older adults doing volunteer work, like Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, has increased greatly. So, like I say, there are a lot of folks, they miss going to work every day. They don't like, sitting around the house, and, they might not be super creative. So that's an outlet for them. They can go and volunteer and fill their time and, spend some time around folks. And that can fill that gap for them. In one poll, 57% of retirees said they had done volunteer or community service work during the past year. So that's a little over half of folks. Enjoy that. And like I say, if you miss that, go do something. Every charity that I know is looking for volunteers. We had a couple of posts where we were like, we're looking for folks to, help us with booth. Well, and we had a bad experience at a booth. We had money and our debit card stolen out of our case, so we had to go to the bank and cancel that and get a new one and all that stuff. And there was a issue there because the woman who did it was supposedly a common volunteer at another charity, and so the woman didn't want to believe that she did that, so there was an issue there. But a lot of folks like to volunteer, and like I say, most charities I know are willing to take on some volunteers. All you gotta do is call and ask. Let's see. Volunteer work is closely tied to well-being during retirement. And that's if that's something you want to do. It may help replace the social capital lost when an individual exits the world of work. And like I said, there are people who, that's their life. They like to get up and go to work every day, and they like, doing and talking to people and relating to people. And when they retire, they might miss that. And like I said, unfortunately, a lot of times when you leave the workplace, your work friends don't really want to be your real friends. You call them up and say, hey, let's get together. Well, we were just work friends, I guess, and then there are other people who are kind of the opposite of that, but I won't get into that story. That was some other lady's problem. But, if you miss work, go do something. Go volunteer, If you don't have to work, but you want to do something, that is a great outlet for you. The many paths to a meaningful, enjoyable retirement have two things in common: doing satisfying things and having satisfying relationships. So there you go. Things that make you happy, things that make you feel satisfied with your life, and relationships that make you happy and make you feel satisfied with your life. Those are the two most important things that you're going to have to deal with when you retire. So think about that. For most older people, both are an extension of histories that have developed throughout the life course. So, your retirement is going to be just an extension, a continuation of your work life. It's a new step in your life. You started out, as a baby. You had to learn to walk and talk and all that fun stuff. You started out as a toddler. You had to learn about the world and how things work and the laws of gravity and when you fall down and everything. And then you had to go to school and learn all the stuff that they teach you in school. And then you might have went to a college or a trade school to learn more stuff. And then you became an adult and you were working. And then you got kind of a foundation under you. And then you started having kids and you had to be a parent. You had to raise these little people up till they could start their own life. And then you had to continue honing your skills and becoming someone in your job that, was kind of a teacher or a mentor to other folks. And then you have to retire, or maybe not. Like I said, there are folks working up into their 80s, God bless them. So everyone's life has a course, and you're supposed to follow the course. And sometimes our course derails. I didn't get to go to school. When I was younger, I was told they couldn't afford to send me to school. And then they sent my brother. But anyway, so I went back later on as I got, some money. Like I say, my husband's grandmother left me some money. His family was very shocked about that. But, he's like, well, what do you want to do with it? And I'm like, I'd like to go back to school. And he's like, okay. So I went back to school. And I paid for the first, couple of years. But after that, I had to pay as I went. And so I had to go to, distance studies, online schools. And they weren't as good as they are now because, now there are some schools that are acceptable for, boards and things like that. Like I said, I couldn't get a license in the state of Kentucky because you couldn't go to a distance school. You had to go to a local school and get your doctorate. or you had to come in from another state with another license from that state in order to do that. So I knew about halfway through my sophomore year I wasn't going to be able to get a license. But I said I want this information for my clients and my people. So I went ahead and I finished off. I didn't do a dissertation because there was no sense in that because I couldn't get a license, and I didn't apply for any internship because I couldn't get a license. But I worked at a counseling center and out on my own. So I had the same experience basically, only that I didn't have to write a dissertation. So that was my way of doing things. And then, like I said, when I had to quit, I couldn't go to the office and sit in a chair all day and drive both. My back was like, no, we can't. We just ain't doing it. So I had to, like I said, mostly work from home. I kept the charity going for a few more years. I kept the ministry going for a few more years. And to the point, COVID really, I think, was part of the problem. We had a lot of problems here in this city during COVID, and that kind of cut things, a little short for some folks. There were some, rioting and problems, and I think that led to the demise of the charity. There was no money coming in. There were people who were applying for positions, and they didn't have the experience. The references didn't check out. So ultimately we had to close things down. But like I say, I'm still here. I'm teaching, I'm writing books, doing some art, I'm a gallery, artist now, I sold, artwork at a gallery now. So I was, and I was like young, I would never dream that would ever happen to me. So, excuse me. And now I'm going to be teaching art at that same gallery pretty soon. So, I'm going to go in there for a couple hours a day, 5 days a week, because that's about all I can do is, an hour or two a day. That's it. So I'm going to go do that, and that's going to be fun, and I think rewarding to do. So, again, when you retire, it's not the end of the world. You can keep on going, and it's still a part of your life. It's a latter part of your life, but it's still a part of your life, and there is life after retirement. You just have to live it. Get up out of that chair and live it. And that's where I'm gonna leave you for today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching or listening. Sorry it's kind of dark. But, that's all for now. Until next time.